तवैर् वेदैः सङ्गोपक्रमोपनिषदैर्गायन्ति जं सामगा ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनः यस्यान्तं न विदुःसुरासुरगणा देवाय तस्मै नमो नमः. Om. Our salutations to that Supreme Being who is one without a second, whom the sages call by various names. Our salutations to Him whose glory has been sung through the rapturous hymns of the scriptures of the world, but whose limitless and infinite glory none can comprehend. But again, whom the sages and devotees realize within their hearts in their deepest contemplation. Him we salute again and again. May He shine in our hearts, manifest therein all His glory, and dispel all darkness and ignorance. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. I'm going to speak to you this morning on Shankara and his teachings. This is his birthday anniversary. He's a well-known historical figure. He was born in the 7th century AD. And he was well known as a great saint, a philosopher, and a poet. It can be said that he was a sort of child prodigy. When he was only 10 years old, he memorized the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras, and also wrote commentaries on some of them. And at this period also, he became so well known as a great scholar that scholars from all over the country would come to discuss philosophy and religion with him. But gradually, he became disgusted with scholarship. He realized that all these great scholars and teachers, they speak lofty philosophy, but their life examples were something different. Materialistic and pleasure-seeking. And so, with his youthful zeal, he wanted to set an example by his own life and turn back the people to the truth. Now again, at this period, his father suddenly died. And so he began to ponder on the problem of life and death. And he wrote a beautiful poem called The Shattering of Delusion. I shall quote to you the translation, some parts of the translation of that famous poem. It says, "Behold the folly of man, in childhood busy with toys, in youth bewitched by love, in age bowed down with cares, and always unmindful of the Lord. The hours fly, these seasons roll, life ebbs, but the breeze of hope blows continually in his heart. Birth brings death, death brings rebirth. This evil needs no proof. Where then, O man, is thy happiness? This life trembles in the balance, like water on a lotus leaf. And yet the sage can show us in an instant how to bridge this sea of change. The sun may bring thee suffering. Thy wealth is no assurance of heaven. Therefore, be not vain of thy wealth, or of thy family, or of thy youth. All are fleeting. All must change. Know this and be free. Enter the joy of the Lord. There are many legends also that gathered round his life. It is very difficult to know whether these legends were true or not. But I will mention one legend. And that was when he was young and his mother had to go and bathe in the river every day, walking a long distance. He felt sorry for her and he wanted the river to turn its course and come nearer to her house, to his house. So he went and prayed to the river. And the legend is that a river turned its course in a zigzag way, opposite way, and then came round just by his home, and then again joined the course. Now, this may be a legend, it may be something that happened naturally, I do not know, but I have been to Kaladi, where he was born, in the district, in the state of Malabar. And I saw with my own eyes how this river really changed its course in an opposite direction. And also, when he was 10 years old, as he realized the vanity of life at that young age, he begged his mother to allow him to enter into the monastic life. After great entreaty, the poor widowed mother had to agree. But on one condition, that before she would die, she must meet him. She must see him before his death. And which Shankara kept. Now, as one begins to seek for truth, though he was a great scholar himself, but in order that Brahman can be realized, because he felt that fruitless is the study of scriptures if Brahman is not realized. Now again, in order to realize Brahman, in order to realize God, he must have the help and guidance of an illumined teacher. So he went in search of a teacher who was a well-known knower of Brahman at that period, and he was living on the bank of the river Narmada. His name is Gaudapada. He wrote a treatise on philosophy, which is well known and studied today also. And Shankara wrote commentaries on his writings. However, you see, this bank of Narmada is a holy place where many spiritual aspirants and holy men go to practice meditation and austerity. Perhaps it will interest you to know that my master, Swami Brahmananda, stayed there for quite a few years. And it was on the bank of Narmada that he attained his Nirvikalpa Samadhi and stayed in that Samadhi for 6 days and 6 nights. However, to come to our story, Shankara approached Gaudapada, who was then absorbed in Samadhi. Then when he woke up, he knew of this young boy who would be coming to him. But he told him that I am not accepting any disciple anymore. But I have my chief disciple, Govindapad. You go to him and he will initiate you into the mysteries of meditation. Then he approached Govindapad, who taught him meditation and spiritual disciplines. And in a short period, he attained the highest Samadhi, Nirvikalpa. Now, he became a teacher. And he was ready to go out teaching. So he came and lived in Benares, which is a well-known place of pilgrimage, as well as a place where many holy people live. And during this period, there is an interesting story. It's not a legend, but it's a fact. And this story runs this way, that he still had some caste prejudice, though he was a knower of Brahman, but he was born in Kaladi, in Malabar district. And in Malabar, there are untouchables, and oh, it's a horrible thing, even not even today. But I visited, I'll tell you my experience. I was a guest of a friend, and this friend had another friend who was the landlord of Kaladi. And so I was to be guest of this gentleman. And so three of us were walking. We had to walk about 10 or 12 miles. And it became dark. And I heard, three of us heard a peculiar cry, peculiar sound, noise. And I inquired, what is this? They said, the untouchables are walking on the road and they're making that noise to tell caste people that they are coming, so the caste people would reply back and then they would move away. And so I told my friends, don't make any noise at all, don't reply back. Let us go also as untouchables. But as we approached nearer, there are about a dozen people. Half of these people jumped into one side of the field, another half jumped into the other side of the field. They were ingrained in such a way of that inferiority complex. Then I asked my friend that you must invite all the untouchables in that part of the country, and I'll remain as your guest on condition that you give them good food at least for a day and give each one a piece of good cloth. And he agreed to do that, and he invited the untouchables. Now he had a big house, the courtyard was large, and these untouchables were sitting under the tree, way out. And of course I did not know their language, but these friends of mine wanted them to come, and they would not listen. They thought some trap was there. And so as they began to approach, they were backing out. And then, I played a trick. I suddenly ran and got hold of a baby and began to carry the baby with me. And then, of course, they had to follow. So they followed. And then they came in. And they were given good food and clothing. And then this landlord opened a school there. And this friend of mine, he was a great scholar. And, he became a Swami of our order later. And he is the author of that wonderful book, Narada Bhakti Sutras, which he translated and commented, just scholarly commentary. And he became the headmaster of the school and began to teach these boys. And there are boarding school for boys, boarding school for girls. And these schools are still continuing, of course, under the Ramakrishna mission. And they are taught to read and write and given education and taught how to live clean. And so again, through the influence of the Ramakrishna mission and through the influence of Mahatma Gandhi, that untouchability has become illegal and it is not observed anymore. But anyway, I told that experience of mine in order to show that even in Shankara, a knower of Brahman, there was that prejudice. And so it happened that as he was going to bathe in the Ganges on the usual time, his road was blocked by an untouchable with 4 dogs playing around. And Shankara ordered him to get away from his path. And this untouchable, in a very gentle way, addressed the dogs and said, "Look here, they don't know even what intelligence you have. He asks us to move. And he says that there is one Atman where is another to move and where is place to move. Is it not filled by one Atman, one Brahman? Isn't that what it teaches?" And he says, "Move away." Then suddenly it dawned on him. And then the vision opened up and he saw Lord Shiva with 4 Vedas. This is a well-known experience in the life of Shankara. And of course, since then he had no prejudice anymore. And so he wrote a very famous poem called Manisha Pancham, which ends with this refrain, each verse. He who has learned to see the one existence everywhere, he is my master, be he Brahmin or Chandala. Chandala means untouchable. Now he began his teaching amongst the scholars of the age. And then he realized there was one great scholar named Mannan Mishra, and he had many disciples. And he only believed in the work portion of the Vedas. And he didn't believe in the monastic life. To him, householder life and practicing rites and ceremonies, that's the highest end of life. And so Shankara realized that unless he could convert this great scholar, it would not be possible for his teachings to be spread. Now again, Mannan Mishra most of the time used to practice ceremonies, rituals, and during that period, you'd close all the doors and big wall all around, closed doors, and inside there would be the sacrificial fire, and there would be other scholars who would offer sacrifice into the fire. And now Shankara, a young boy, prankish also, because I think he was about 16 years old at the time. He got up on a tree nearby and jumped. And suddenly they see a monk with shaven head. And so that was a bad omen for him. And so this great scholar asks, from whence comes this shaved head? In a very angry mood, he asked. And Shankara, in a very teasing way, he said, don't you have eyes to see? This just arises from the neck up. And this way the conversation went on. He was getting madder and Shankara was teasing him all the time. Then there were other scholars who said, now look here, this young boy is no ordinary. It's not any boy that is ordinary. Whatever he is speaking, he is talking, there is a scriptural background to it. So ask him what he wants. Then Manan Mishra quieted down and asked him, what do you want of me? He said, I want to debate with you. And there is one condition. And the condition is, if you defeat me, then I'll become a householder by marrying a girl. And if you are defeated, you have to renounce the world and be a monk. And so Manan Mishra thought, now, if we can convert this fellow, it would be a wonderful thing. So he was agreeable to enter into debate. But then Manan Mishra asked him, but who is to be the umpire? And Shankara said, I'd like to have your wife as the umpire. Because Shankara knew his wife was a great scholar. Now, the wife agreed to be the umpire, but she was in a dilemma. She realized, on the one hand, her husband, in whom she would see God. And on the other hand, there is this monk, in whom she would see God. So how to decide? Then she said, I'll put two necklaces, two garlands of flowers on both of you. And whichever garland dries up first would be considered defeated. Then the debate went on for some days together. And gradually the garland in the neck, on the neck of Mishra, Manan Mishra, began to wither. And he realized that he was defeated. So he said, yes, you win. So I must keep the condition. But Shankara said, no, you can't take monastic life on condition. I made that condition true, but I don't want you to become a monk just to fulfill the condition. If you feel this passion, then only I'll accept you as a monk. And he said, yes, I feel the ephemeral nature of everything. I want to follow you. So he followed. There is another episode to it which I do not wish to bring out. That is, his wife intervened, and then she was also defeated somehow. And then, because his wife said, I am his half, you have not defeated him completely. And so, of course, Shankar felt that there was danger there to debate with a woman, you know. But anyhow, the wife agreed that she was defeated. And then Manan Mishra became a monk, and he wrote annotations on the commentary of Shankara, which became famous. You see, we had to study his annotation of Shankara's commentary on the Brahma Sutras. And that his annotation has been named or made famous by giving the name of his wife. And so now again, throughout the country, his teachings began to spread. He died at the early age of 32 at Kedarnath Temple in the Himalayas, 13,000 feet high. I had the fortune to go and visit that place of pilgrimage also. And during this period, he organized what is known today as the order of monks. There did exist monastic life from the very beginning of the Vedic period, but it was never organized. It was Buddha who first organized monastic order, and then next Shankara organized the Hindu monastic order. You see, we all Swamis belong to Shankara's order. And he divided this order into 10 sects with a common principle, common ground, and established 4 monasteries in the 4 corners of India, 4 north, south, east and west. And of course, every monk is supposed to visit all these places of pilgrimage also. But most of the monks, again, don't visit all the 4. They visit 3 and leave 1 with the expectation that at the moment of death he will think of that. Oh, he has to go there. And so he'll think of the Lord. Of course, I visited 3. I didn't visit the last one, 4th one. But not with that idea, of course. His literary output was tremendous. He wrote the commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras, and then many original works, as we study one of his works, Viveka Chudamani, and also many poems and hymns and many other minor works, and it's a big list. He preached no new doctrine, but what he preached was non-dualistic philosophy, if I can call that philosophy, because philosophy in our sense is experience. And based upon the Upanishads. As I have often told you that there are 4 Mahavakyas, sacred words. Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, Ayam Atma Brahma, Prajnanam Brahma. Now every monk is given one of these Mahavakyas. And there is a special Mahavakya for each order. Of course, I am not going to tell you what is our Mahavakya in our order, but I have given you all the 4 Mahavakyas. And he based his whole truth upon these Mahavakyas. In one verse he writes that what has been taught in hundreds of scriptures, that I shall speak in half a line. And this is it. Brahman is real. This universe of appearance is unreal. And the jiva, the so-called individual, is no other than Brahman, no other than Brahman, no other than Brahman. Now, of course, when he says this appearance of universe is unreal, he does not say it is unreal as something that does not exist at all. Like he gives the illustration, which is a very funny illustration, you will think, to say that a barren woman has a son, the son of a barren woman. You see, that's the example he gives. That is completely a false thing. If she is barren, she cannot have a son. So it is not unreal like that. But he says there are degrees of reality. There is, even mirage has a reality as long as you are seeing it. But as you approach it, it has vanished. Dream has a reality greater than the mirage. As only when you wake up, the dream has vanished. Now this waking state has a greater reality, greater degree of reality, because it continues until you are awakened to the fourth turiya, transcendental. Then this disappears. Then again, of course, it disappears. Then again, it comes back to you and you see Brahman everywhere, the reality everywhere. Just as a piece of gold, if you know that piece of gold, whatever shape or form it may have, you can see it is all gold. Only difference in names and forms. Similarly, there is this whole universe, but the reality is Brahman. Behind this name and form, the one reality, one Brahman. Then, of course, he says that somehow, you see, you are Atman, you are one with Brahman. I am one with Brahman. Each one is one with Brahman. But somehow we have forgotten. Through avidya, he calls, Sarmaya Ignorance. Now this ignorance again is beginningless. Now again he points out that this Maya is only a statement of facts. It is something, how it happened or why it happened, we do not know. It's very frank about it. He says that it is something that is inexplicable, unexplainable, but it's a fact of everybody's experience. For instance, light and darkness are opposed to each other. You cannot mistake the light for darkness, nor mistake the darkness for light. But somehow, through some inexplicable reason, this is what has happened. For instance, I, the Atman, the subject, and the object of experience. Body, mind, these are objects of experience. Or family, or wealth, objects of experience. But through some inexplicable reason, we are identifying ourselves with the mind, body, our possessions, our home. There is an identification. How it has happened, we don't know. But it is a matter of fact, an experience of everybody, even the greatest intellect, who knows that he is separate from the body. Yet again, in every behavior, is identifying himself with the body. And so, how to transcend this ignorance is the main point. Then he says that only by transcending these three states, waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep, by awakening to the fourth, which is the same as Buddha, that is awakened one, and what Christ says as to be born in spirit is the same thing. It is then that one realizes the truth. But in order that we can realize this truth of Brahman, truth of God, by simply uttering the word Brahman, it doesn't happen. For instance, there is the buried treasure, he says. And you say, treasure, come out. It doesn't come out. You have to dig a shovel, take a shovel, dig and dig. Then you get the treasure. Similarly, there are methods and means the spiritual disciplines which we have to practice in order that this ignorance can break. He gives three conditions: human birth, desire for that truth of God, and the grace of a holy man. These are the three conditions. In the Upanishads we read, you have to hear about this truth, that is, from a man of God. Then you have to reason upon this truth. Don't accept blindly, because then you don't understand. There's a long story in the Upanishads how two disciples went to learn of the truth, and when the teacher said, "You are Brahman," and one disciple thought he has known the truth, and he went back and began to preach and teach, saying that this body is Brahman. And the other fellow was not satisfied, so he comes back again and again, questions him again and again. Then he realizes ultimately. And the same idea, what we find in the Upanishads, Shankara explains this way. Then the disciple must hear the truth of the Atman, reflect upon it, and meditate upon it constantly without pause for a long time. Thus the wise man reaches that highest state in which consciousness of subject and object is dissolved away, and the infinite unitary consciousness alone remains. And he knows the bliss of Nirvana while still living on earth. Here is a very important point. To know the reality, there must be unified consciousness. In other words, I am the knower. This is the object of knowledge. And as long as there is a separation, so long there is something foreignness given to it. I do not know this thing in itself as it is. This Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher, also pointed out, but he didn't know how to dissolve it. But Shankara also pointed out that as long as there is a least demarcation between the subject and object, you do not know the truth. Then it has to be a unified consciousness. Then you realize. That is why it is called transcendental. And so he emphasizes upon this experience, that religion is this experience of the truth. There are other minor experiences on the way. But visions or experiences from that standpoint, they are not enough. And then again, visions there are of different kinds. For instance, if one can take a drug and get visions. But that's no spiritual vision. The only thing, when spiritual visions and experiences come, they are milestones on the path of progress. But as visions and experiences come, there comes certain transformation in your character. You gain a greater control over yourself. Your character, your life becomes transformed to a great extent. But of course, when you reach this ultimate truth, that is inexpressible, indefinable. And in order to attain this, he emphasized upon meditation. As he says, certain knowledge of the reality is gained only through meditation upon right teaching, and not by sacred ablutions or alms giving, or by the practice of hundreds of breathing exercises. But again, Shankara points out that it is not so easy to be absorbed in meditation for everybody. There are certain qualifications or qualifications that we must acquire in life. And when we study those qualifications, they are so extreme, they seem so extreme that very few have such qualifications. So we have again struggled to attain those qualifications. In this connection, I might point out to you that while I was studying uh, this Vedanta with one of the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Sharananda, who was a knower of Brahman. And I put to him this question, well, if one has these qualifications that Shankara speaks of, then that is the same as knowledge of Brahman. Then he said, that's true. Then he said that it is not that you are, to begin with, you have these qualifications, but you struggle to attain these qualifications. And through that struggle, by striving, you attain these qualifications and immediately there is a knowledge of Brahman. Now, to just summarily to tell you what these are. First is to discriminate between the real and the unreal. And when you discriminate, you realize Brahman alone is real. Then, as you realize that, then you have to renounce the fruits, the effects of your actions. Renounce the enjoyment of the fruits of your actions of this life and of life hereafter. That is, no idea of going to heaven also and having heavenly enjoyments. Because according to us, there are heavenly enjoyments, but they are effects of deeds of this life. And as soon as the effects are exhausted, you are thrown back into this world again. And so you have to renounce all that. Then you have to acquire the following virtues, such as tranquility, self-control, mental poise, faith in the words of the scriptures and in the words of your guru, and also faith in yourself that it is possible for you to realize this truth. Then self-surrender, that is to keep our mind and heart fixed in God. And then, of course, the desire for truth, desire for liberation. And the intensity of longing, if it comes, then the truth becomes revealed to you. You see, whenever Sri Ramakrishna would be asked how to find God, it's in a very simple way he would say, yearn for him with a longing heart. And this yearning comes to every one of us if we struggle, even if there is a little desire, and then practice thinking of God, meditating upon God. Few minutes even a day. It does help gradually to intensify that longing. To sum up his methods and means, faith, devotion, and constant union with God through prayer and meditation, these are declared by the sacred scriptures to be the direct means of liberation. To him who abides by them comes liberation from that bondage which has been forced by ignorance. Now again, I will just conclude by reading to you, quoting to you, what the experience is as Shankara puts in his words. Having attained that, he says, the ego has disappeared. I have realized my identity with Brahman, and so all my desires have melted away. I have risen above ignorance and my knowledge of the seeming universe. What is this joy that I feel? Who shall measure it? I know nothing but joy, limitless, unbounded. The ocean of Brahman is full of nectar, the joy of the Atman. The treasure I have found there cannot be described in words. The mind cannot conceive of it. My mind fell like a hailstone into this vast expanse of Brahman's ocean. Touching one drop of it, I melted away and became one with Brahman. And now, though I return to normal consciousness, to human consciousness, I abide in the joy of the Atman. Om Hari Om. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya. Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya. Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Abir Maidhi Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tena Mang Pahi Nityam. Om. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from death to immortality. Lead us from darkness to light. Light us through and through, and guide us evermore with thy loving presence. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace.